again, we appreciate you very much taking time out of your busy schedule so that we can get this process started. Once again, I want to remind you, we're here to look at starting having a quality service for the citizens of Augusta Richmond County. And one of the things that we must keep in mind that we realize this is a professional services in terms of how we want the citizens of Augusta Richmond County to be served when it comes to this service. And our in-house professionals must be allowed to express themselves freely without feeling any sense of retaliation, because this is going to be important. They're truly the experts. Myself and my colleagues, we know what we would like to see, but we are not the experts at the end of the day. And I think we need to respect that as much as humanly possible at the end of the day. And I think that's how we set the table for this. Last time we had a conversation around what we wanted to look like in terms of an outline. And one of the things that we end up, one of the places that we end up with for something that Commissioner Clark zoomed in on, a couple other commissioners, Commissioner Clark for sure, and that was having a dispatch. What would a dispatch operator look like inside the 911 center, and to see was that appropriate and would that work? That is just a question. That does not have to be. It has to go that way. That is something that has to be entertained. And not only that, it has to really be entertained, because on the current agreement that we have with the provider who happens to be Gold Cross, that was one of the criteria in there that a Gold Cross person would be in the 911 center, even though we know that never happened. So we'll get a chance to look at that today and allow Mr. Dunlap to elaborate around that, since he's the 911 director. So before I get started, are there any questions before we get started around it? Thank you once again, Mr. Dunlap. That was the question last time. I think you definitely were here last time. And so with that being said, I think you anticipated that this would come your way. So the question becomes, having a Gold Cross representative helping streamline the process out of your office. How does that work for you, and what does that look like?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. If we take a step back and we think of the process, how it currently occurs, and again, when someone calls 911, it's answered at the 911 center. They're given the greeting, 911, do you need police, fire, or ambulance? If they request an ambulance, the caller is advised, well, we ask them the address, we'll verify the address, and then we'll advise them to stay on the line while we transfer them to the ambulance service. And then that transfer occurs. And that's about a 20-second time period from the time the call is received until the time the call is transferred to Gold Cross. So if we look at putting a Gold Cross call taker or individual in the 911 center, that process will continue to occur, and for a couple of different reasons. We're on two totally different phone systems. We're on two totally different radio systems. We're on two different computer-aided dispatch, and that's the CAD system where we enter the calls for service, track the units, update notes or incident information and location information. So if you put an individual from the EMS provider in the 911 center, the 911 call will still be answered by an Augusta Richmond County 911 call taker. Same process will occur. If they say they need an ambulance, we're going to be transferring the 911 call across the 911 arena to that Gold Cross individual, because there's a couple of things. First thing, you cannot put the 911 call on hold. That's a national standard. You don't put anybody on hold. And if you did put them on hold, you'd have to put them on hold and then yell across the room to say, hey, EMS, you got a call on line 1. So it's not a good practice to put anybody on hold. I see Commissioner Clark, you have a question. I'll pause.
Well, I was just going to ask.
Hold on, excuse me. Let's kind of let break protocol. Do you, Commissioner Clark, come to the chair if you don't mind. My question is, Mr. Clark, can you wait, or do you need to? Can he?
No, I'll wait. I'll wait.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. My apologies. So again, as I said before, we're on two totally different computer-aided dispatch CAD systems, two totally different radio systems, two phone systems. You know, our logging recorder, which captures all that data as far as the voice traffic, telephone traffic, radio traffic. We're on two different systems. So in order to potentially, if we wanted to get to the end goal of having them under the same roof, all of that would have to be set up and performed prior to us being able to actually do that. Not only to mention, there would need to be two individuals from Gold Cross here at the 911 center. And the purpose is, if you had to get up, go to the restroom, take a break, lunch, whatever the case is, you couldn't just have one person here and they have to leave the room and that process continue where we have to try to transfer a call over to someone who's not there. You know, of course, I can get into the, you know, you think about the elephant of, well, okay, you're having someone from an outside agency under your purview in your house, so to speak, that doesn't fall under your leadership. And there's also going to have to be additional training and what have you that would have to occur, because there is dealing with the sheriff's department and law enforcement, there is critical criminal sensitive information that is passed along that it's a protection thing for the 911 center for the city.
Okay, Mr. Dunlap, let me go get Commissioner Clark before you trying to solve it. Let's try to get this question in at this particular time. Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dunlap, you gave a very detailed, intelligent, documented, factual statement concerning what you have there. And I think we can probably fully understand it a lot better now. Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
What I would like to ask is that when we're keeping track of when the 911 operator first answers a call and turns it over to, is there a time stamp when he or she first answers the call?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there a time stamp when the call is transferred to Gold Cross?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, big question that I think we all want to know. Is there some kind of time stamp that Gold Cross supplies when they actually have the wheels rolling?
No, sir.
That call.
No, sir. Not currently at the moment. There's no data that we receive back from Gold Cross at this time.
Okay, let me ask you this. You're the expert with this. Do you think that would actually help Augusta if we had some type of documentation as to actually when Gold Cross dispatched the ambulance and got it out of the shelter en route? Would that help with our data? Would it help with our response times? Would that help? I think it would help probably situationally. What do you think?
I believe that would help us have a better idea of how long it takes between the time the individual has reached the 911 center until the time that there's actually an ambulance that is on the way, that has been dispatched.
Okay, don't you think that's something then that we need to work on to try to institute and have working?
I believe we have that capability. We can see what that time frame is, and then we can look at opportunities to reduce that time to ensure that we have better response times for ambulance dispatching.
Okay, let's do that. I think that's a good step. Okay, thank you, Mr. Dunlap, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I have a question, but I'm gonna reserve mine now. I'll go to Commissioner Sias. Commissioner Sias, go ahead.
Just one quick comment along with what Commissioner Clark was saying. Not only did we need to know that, but we also need to have some kind of feedback when they arrive on site. Would you agree with that, Mr. Dunlap?
Yes, sir.
Ooh,
And that goes, I was just gonna say, it goes right back to Commissioner Clark. His question as far as what would be the outcome of what we're trying to achieve with that data, and that is to see the amount of time from the initial 911 call when it's received to the time the ambulance gets on scene. So again, looking at that data, just like we're looking at from the time it's received to the time an ambulance is dispatched. And again, when you think of an ambulance being dispatched, is that the ambulance that's being dispatched at this moment in time that we're speaking of now, that ambulance can be diverted to a higher priority call. So there's other matrix involved that we have to drill down into to ensure. If you think of it, if we're dispatching an ambulance over to the municipal building and that unit gets diverted, well, if you're using the time of right now when that ambulance is being dispatched, but they don't show up for 30 minutes, but the actual ambulance that went to the municipal building was only dispatched 10 minutes ago, is that a 30-minute response time? In actuality, from the time the call is received until they got there, or is that a 10-minute response time because that's the unit that was assigned to that call? I'm not trying to get into the weeds, but just things that we need to think about.
Mr. Sykes, go ahead.
Let me follow up. And Mr. Dunlap, you're exactly right. And one thing you said, in case an ambulance get diverted to a higher priority, we have no idea whether the guy, if it didn't show up or got diverted, we at this present time will have no knowledge or reason of why it was diverted. It could have went to a lower priority call. Just the bottom line, we have no data, no information, and no control from the time we turn that call over to the time that's our last contact with that call, basically. Am I correct?
Yes, sir, that's accurate.
Say again?
Yes, sir, that is accurate.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Dunlap, go ahead, Commissioner Clark, and then I'm going to come and answer my question. Go ahead.
okay. Thank you. Mr. Dunlap, how we're talking about a higher priority call and an ambulance being dispatched. When we receive 911 calls, how do we know? Well, I know we don't ask a whole lot of medical questions, but how will we know that it's been dispatched to higher priority call? How do we know the difference in a low call and a high call?
Well, currently that's one of our challenges is we don't. So currently, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of the EMS provider, but just to try to provide the steps, they're using the emergency medical dispatch, and it's not really dispatch, it's more call taking. It's a questionnaire software program that determines, you know, if and I'm going to say this because he's not here, and I'll just go back and use a real world example. When the commissioner from the 7th goes to take his trash out and slips in his driveway and breaks his ankle, compared to someone who is at Harvey's on Gordon Highway that has a heart attack and becomes unconscious, based on the questioning of the call, it's potentially a lower priority for the commissioner from the 7th who fell in his driveway with a non-life-threatening injury versus someone who is unconscious. So that's your kind of comparison. So with that protocol software that they're using, they're making the determination on the priority level of which one is the greater need to have a unit go lights and sirens to get there the fastest.
All right. Yeah, let me get my question if you don't mind. Mr. Dunlap and Commissioner Clark, you can weigh in on this, but I want to make sure I don't misrepresent your input in terms of getting this data that you was talking about. Would this data make a difference? I think in all of your questions to Mr. Dunlap, you was asking him on the current setup, if 911 receives the call, how is it that we can keep some sense of timelines from the time that Gold Cross arrives on the scene? You're addressing the current setup as we are. Was that not correct?
I am addressing the current setup and how we can correct it to gather correct data. Okay,
good. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back to Mr. Dunlap now. Mr. Dunlap, in your opening statements, one of the things that you told us that this CAD system, the functions that we had, and the ones that Gold Cross has, they're not compatible. Now, for what Mr. Clark, Commissioner Clark has put on the table, or as the conversation we all just had, I would say, that's not necessary about the systems not communicating, because we're tracking now. So my question to you, is there another suggestion or another option that possibly could do something different? Is there another option other than what we just discussed?
Yes, sir. There are other options, and I'll give you a suggestion, I'll give you another solution. I'll give a recommendation, just a solution. So there are systems that have third-party middleware software programs, hardware and software. And this is, I'm not an IT expert, but I can give you this information. This third-party middleware program is able to take the information from two disparate systems, two unlike systems. So in this case, in this example, let's talk about the two CAD systems, the two computer-aided dispatch systems, the one for Augusta, Richmond County, and the one from Gold Cross. It is a program that sits in the middle of the two CAD systems, and it shares information between each other. So for example, if the 911 call was received and the information in that EMD program protocol system was entered by the Augusta 911 call taker, once that information is shipped to the dispatcher, it would also be shipped over to Gold Cross, to the EMS provider. When an ambulance was dispatched on that call, that information is shared not only in the EMS provider system, but it's also shared over to the Augusta 911 system, the CAD system. So it works to update ambulance status. Of course, we're dealing with dispatching ambulance, we're dealing with dispatching fire and police. We wouldn't have it set up to share that information back and forth, because that just needs to stay here. But that solution would allow ambulance status, if there's information that updates within the notes, or incident location, information as far as patient status, all that information can be shared between the two. Now, I'll also say, of course, that solution is going to cost a fee for that middleware product. There will also have to be a cost between the CAD system for Augusta and that middleware, like an interface. And there would also have to be a cost between the EMS provider CAD system and that interface. So I don't have any idea as far as cost, and I know that's an IT thing as far as security and network and capability, but those solutions are out there, and those solutions are working in other areas in the United States.
But at the same time, you're saying, in terms of all the questions that the commissioners posed to you about being able to track and be able to have a sense of data, it does be able to provide all of that data and everything at the end of the day as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. Does that also have availability to take when the ambulance actually arrives on the scene of the patient?
Yes, sir. So everything that would be tracked and time stamped within both systems would be shared with each other.
Okay, thank you. Good.
And what's the name of that software again?
There are different companies that provide that type of software. There's a handful of them, and I would just go out on a limb and say that would need to be something that would be procured.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Chief Williams, you got any comments or suggestions there on this particular conversation that you're hearing?
I believe that mine will come with number 2 on the agenda.
Okay. All right, sir. Commissioner Dennis Williams?
Well, mine will come under number 4, but
okay.
we also, a couple of things I was concerned about, and we've already discussed them. That's about the run reports, the timeline, patient status changes, who made the adjustment, and what the levels are to keep up with basically with the different status of the ambulances changing. Okay. But I have more for item number 4.
Okay. I thank you all for sticking with number 1 at this time. I appreciate that. Commissioner
Right.
Scott, any questions or comments around what you just heard?
No, my question had been answered. It was regarding the time and the priority call. That's kind of interesting, and about when one ambulance is diverted to another call. So right now I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay, Mr. Minister, do you have any comments around what we just?
No, I think, you know, my concern has always been around just making sure you can appropriately manage the resources. And I think the solution provided by Mr. Dunlap would help to make sure you can manage the resources appropriately. And I think y'all will get into the number of ambulance and things of that nature later in the conversation. So I'm fine.
So my question to the committee and to my colleagues, general colleagues as well. Do we have a problem at this particular time asking the administrator to try to get IT to look at some of this third-party software to try to see what would that look like if we want to go that route? Do we have a problem with that? Commissioner Sayers, go ahead.
I don't have a problem with it, but I want to go back to the way Mr. Dunlap addressed it. Because it's an item to be procured, we would have to really be careful with that. We can just find out who has software out there, what different types, but be very careful that we don't violate the procurement statute.
Thank you. I couldn't agree with you more. I appreciate that. But so we don't mind, but at the end of the day, let him do an investigation of what products out there. Okay, Commissioner Clark.
I was just going to ask, does Mr. Dunlap have any ballpark figure how expensive that equipment is?
We were just discussing. We don't even want to get that. We were going to shut that down. We figured we are going to violate the procurement process. We may be
okay.
Top one, so we let the administrators look at what products are out there that can provide.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other questions around it? Mr. Administrator, you clear on that one?
Yes, sir. Taking my notes now. We'll be ready.
All right, thank you, sir. Believe it or not, I got to find mine. Okay, number 2 was the number of dedicated Richmond County ambulance dispatch response time. That's what we had there. I'm gonna start this one off with you, Chief Williams, if you don't mind, since this is one of the things that you mentioned last time, and you just mentioned again that you wanted to address that. I just had some questions around it. So if you don't mind, you can take the lead on that if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Chairman. The first thing is I will refer back to a little of Mr. Dunlap's presentation. And we're talking about resource management. And we kind of talked about the mechanics of data, collecting data, keeping up with data, and managing the resource. The important part of this section, or the important part of this function, is the resource. So we talk about getting timestamps on when the call went out and when they received the call and when they're going to respond. All that is good. All that that's perfect data to do something with down the road. But that data becomes less important if we have the appropriate number of units assigned to our county. Because you can like Mr. Dunlap say, you get the call and everything is done in 20 seconds. But if it takes 15 or 20 minutes or 35 minutes for that unit to come from who knows where to get to that patient, it don't matter how fast it don't matter how fast it's processed in dispatch. So if we have the allocated number of units, which we have to decide what that is, and we have the proper people on those units, all that becomes less important, because even if we get a unit diverted here, we have another unit that we can get to this patient in a reasonable amount of time. Resource management, having the data is very important, but having the wheels on the ground is what we need. That's what we're dealing with right now. Okay. And that's going to be, to my opinion, one of the most important parts of this process to make sure that we can get what we feel is the appropriate amount of units in our county, dedicated to our county to serve our citizens.
Okay.
And we just have to, all of us have to get together and decide what that number is going to be and make sure that the service, make sure we get that number every day, 365 days a week, a year, 24 hours a day. That's the important piece.
Totally agree.
Level of service, I would say, as far as and when I say level of service, not right now, I'm talking to the actual men and women on those units.
Yes.
Advanced, and some folks are intermediate because that's an old level. They've moved to intermediates, and then paramedics. A lot of times, if a unit come out and they have 2 basics on there, and that level of service that patient requires is above that, then that requires our folks to provide that service right in, which we more than willing to do. But if we're going to go about this the right way, let's make sure that this agency provide that level of service from the very part. And we know it might not be every day, and we're gonna help as much as we can. But those are the important pieces of when you talk about resources.
Okay.
The
Let me,
levels that they provide us and the number of units that they provide us every day.
Mr. Stiles, I'm gonna go to you, but I'm gonna throw something out there. But I want to answer for it, but I'm gonna come back to it based on what Chief Williams just said. When he just made mention of that his people may have to ride the ambulance based on the skill sets that's on the ambulance, based on the nature of the injury or the person that's being cared to. So what we also gonna have to consider here is that, do we want to continue first responders in the way that we're doing it, and how do we do that? 'Cause a lot of times first responders are not automatic as we think they are. Don't respond to that just now. I'm gonna go to Commissioner Sayers, but I want to do that before I forgot that. Commissioner Sayers.
I don't know what the fuck you're saying.
I'll tell you just a minute, Commissioner.
We can hear you. All right, Chairman, I have a question for Chief Williams.
Yes, sir.
The question I have, sir, is give us your opinion on this thing about I'm gonna call it a Roman paramedic in a car. Not a Roman paramedic in a car. You understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, we actually had quite a bit of discussion about that. Let me
For our benefit, can you tell everybody what that is?
Well, basically, it's you put a paramedic in a SUV type vehicle, and he or she could respond pretty much the same way that the fire truck would, and provide patient care until the EMS unit, the transporting unit, gets there to transport the patient to the necessary facility. And I hate to keep harping on this, Mr. Commissioner. That is good. That is good. But we do that now with the fire truck. We do that. We send the fire truck out and provide that care until the unit gets there to transport. We got 19 stations. We got 19 pumps and 6 trucks. We do a good job of that. It's the case where our folks are sitting with a patient 15, 20, 30 minutes waiting for that medical unit to get there to transport that patient. So even if you have that paramedic there with that patient, with everything, with all the equipment, the tools and the meds they need, that patient still needs to be transported in a reasonable amount of time.
All right. Well, let me just follow up real quick, Chairman. So then, Chief, what I'm going to interpret from what you just said is taking the fire department completely out of it, even if those what you was talking about level of service, if those two basic EMTs arrived on the scene in a provider ambulance and a paramedic was on their way in a vehicle, you got two problems. If the basic folks hadn't arrived, you got a problem. And if they get there and the paramedic ain't there, they have a treatment problem. Am I correct? Or level of service issue. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
they have a level of service they can't go beyond. Even if that patient needs it, they can't do it because that's not in their scope. And then you get into legal issues with that. So yes, that is a problem if they get there and they need a higher level of service that they can.
So the best way to do that is have the proper level of service on the ambulance and get it there on time.
And get it there on time.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I think my colleague asked what I was talking about. Right now, currently, Chief Williams, as well as Director Dunn, are first responders automatic? Are first responders being dispatched by Gold Cross? How are first responders getting on the scene?
Not on all calls, they're not automatic, no, sir.
They're not automatic, okay. What from your end, Director Dunlap, are they automatic or are they requested by Gold Cross?
It's either requested by Gold Cross or we have a short list of automatic dispatch. So if someone calls in and says someone's having a heart attack, chest pains, drowning, unconscious, those are automatically, when we're on that 911 call and we hear that's what the emergency is, we will go ahead and automatically dispatch first responders. There are some cases where we have dropped off the line because it seems like a lower priority type call that doesn't meet the criteria that the fire department has furnished us for those automatic dispatches. And Gold Cross will turn around and call us and make the request for first responders. There are also times where we've had the EMS provider call us to request first responders because they have an extended response time before they can have a unit arrive to the scene.
Chief Williams, are we prepared? I think you heard the quality of, the ask in terms of service that is needed based on the 911 call that is automatic. Are we prepared to respond to all EMS calls, or should we? From a first responder.
First, we are prepared. We are prepared, and let me say that
you can do more investigation because it's kind of like off the top of my head here.
No, of course, in the fire service, with the EMS service, with the fire service, we still, even with the EMS, we still have to respond to fire calls and wrecks and stuff like that. Okay. So what we in the fire service, we don't want to tie a engine up on a I got a stomach ache. We don't tie our engine up on a stomach ache and that engine missed a actual structure fire with people trapped right around the corner.
Right.
Why somebody to come from farther away, which affects that call. Now, if we have to go, we want to go, but that's why we have that list of priority calls that this is very serious. We need to get somebody there quick. But, and I'm not being facetious when I say stomachache, because we get those type of calls, and a stomachache can be serious, but we get calls like Mr. Dunlap say, we have this list that have been determined that we need to get somebody there now. This is serious. Heart attack, gunshot, stabbing, drowning, unconscious. We going to go, no doubt.
Okay.
But there's calls that we get that, like, we don't want to send a truck to just sit there and wait on somebody because they stumped their toe on the end of the bed. And we sitting there, we waiting, and there's a structure fire around the corner and somebody's house, somebody's child is trapped.
Thank you.
We have that priority list to kind of mitigate that balance right there.
Okay. Mr. Dunlap, I think you had something.
We are prepared to go.
Thank you, sir. Sorry.
I was just
Okay.
gonna jump in with if we had the number of ambulances to a level that we were comfortable with, I believe the fire department, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of them, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Chief Williams, would be comfortable with sending first responders on all calls. And it would also eliminate the guesswork in the 911 center to see, well, do we need to wait to see if we're going to get a call from the EMS provider to see if we need to send them? Or is this one that do we need to send them or not? I believe that would potentially take that guesswork out.
So it would be something that's go along with it, not only just the amount of ambulance, but also the response time as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Commissioner Clark.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Shaw,
Yes, sir.
didn't the previous fire chief give a list of calls that first responders could request?
That's the list that Mr. Dunlap mentioned.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So, okay, thank you. I just wanted to try to get this as commissioner. I wanted to know what that was. So, Chief, I want to go back for specifics, if you don't mind. You was talking about who was the owner of the ambulance. What should an ambulance, in your mind, in a perfect world, what should an ambulance look like in terms of the skill set on that ambulance? You know, if you had like a paramedic, you had basic. On the average ambulance, what professional level should be on those ambulances?
And I'm just a side note, you know, some agencies, some counties require a paramedic on every ambulance.
Okay.
But we would, if we could get an intermediate, advanced paramedics, any combination of that, that would help a lot. And again, I hate to keep saying this, Commissioner, but we can accommodate and help out with the level on some, not on every time, but sometime, but it's just getting that medical unit there in a reasonable amount of time is what our biggest concern is. Because we have paramedics, we have intermediates, we have advanced, we have those throughout the fire department.
Can I make an
observation,
Chief?
What'd you say, sir?
Can I allow me to make an observation, if you don't mind? If I'm wrong, just correct me.
Right.
One of the things that seems to be coming across to me that you're constantly attempting to remind us about is that we need to be concerned about response time.
Yes, sir.
That's definitely, don't miss that.
Don't miss the response time. And Mr. Dunlap just mentioned it. He said he wasn't gonna put words in my mouth, but he did. So, but he just mentioned it. When we talk about the fire department, you say, well, can you respond to all first responder calls? Yes, we are able to do that. And that would not be a big issue if they didn't have to sit there so long waiting on the ambulance to respond. It's the sitting and waiting with that patient is what the concern is. It's not the going out and providing the patient care. It's those long waits is that the issue is.
Let me ask you this. Do your people, based on what you're saying, let's stay right there where you are. I'm driving your first responder vehicle. I'm sitting there waiting. Are they tracking time on their own accord just to say, well, Chief, we went out today, man, it was 30 minutes before anybody got there. I mean, we had to sit there. Is that being done from you just on the internal, on a personal level at all?
We can look at the file report. We can go back to the file report and we can tell when we got the call, when we arrived on the scene. And then usually, well, not usually, 99.9% of the time, when the EMS unit arrives on the scene, our personnel will announce across the radio, dispatch be advised, go across on the scene. So there is a timestamp of that whole call. Now, what we've been doing lately is we used to ask for an ETA. Go across, won't give us the ETA.
What is the ETA, if you don't mind?
Yeah. Now we're asking have they dispatched their unit this way? Because they won't tell us when the unit's gonna get there, but at least tell me that they have somebody coming so I know what I need to do from this point on.
Can you give us the definition of ETA?
What you say, sir?
Estimated
ETA,
time of arrival.
Estimated time of arrival. I
Mr.
had
Sizer.
the military man had to step in there.
Yeah, yeah. I just want everybody else to get it. I mean, I get enough calls myself to know what it is.
Okay, yeah, estimated time of
Sometimes
arrival. So our personnel will ask dispatch, that's after 20 minutes of being on the scene. That's after a 20-minute time. Dispatch, can you give me an ETA? Go across won't give an ETA. So dispatch, can you tell me, have they responded a unit to this location?
Yeah, I already knew what ETA was. Sometimes I say EAT, expected arrival time.
Okay,
okay?
all right.
Commissioner Sayers?
I just have one question for Chief Williams. If he don't feel like he want answered, I can live with it. I kind of and mention about requesting the ETA. Were the first responders advised to maybe not do that out on the radio?
We advised our folks not to do it because we wasn't getting one. It wasn't a procedure thing or a let's not announce it over the radio. It was just that, well, you're not gonna get one, so stop asking. Just ask if they have anybody coming your way.
Okay, I got it. It was my impression that been given out, and I'm glad you acknowledge it. But the reason you acknowledge it is, I would say, it's probably a good reason. But again, that is something that absolutely need to be addressed, and I want to believe that's why you consistently emphasizing when that getting that ambulance to the scene on time.
Right.
So thank you.
If the committee doesn't mind, with Chief William making mention that he think he can have some data, internal data, just on his people communicating back and forth and knowing that they're leaving the scene and stuff. Chief William, can you get us probably just last 6 months of that up to date?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you can get it out to us, but when we set our next meeting date, you can get it to us if you can in advance of that. You can get it to by way of the administrator.
Yes, sir, we will.
You got it.
Yes, sir, we can do that.
Okay. Any other questions? Before we go to I'm going to make a comment about our next meeting, if you don't mind. I think we've addressed to, and all these are not fully flushed out. These are things that we're going to still have more conversations, because we know we got another chief coming on. We want him to have opportunity to weigh in on this as well. So let's not lose sight of that. We think that's going to happen in I would suspect, a reasonable time, because this is going to be, I think, another several months conversation that we're currently having. But I would like for our next meeting, based on where we're headed here, is whether this is the administrator, whether this is legal, or whether Ms. Bonner can get the information for us. But I'd like for the legal and the administrator to get information. I think it's from the state. Exactly, and I don't know the state agency's name, and I apologize for it. I'm sure some of you all do. Exactly what service does a zone provider provide? And that's going to be part of our conversation at our very next meeting. So we'll know. And from there, you start looking at, okay, how do you enhance the service or whatever? But what are the basic services that a zone provider? That presentation could be made to us by legal. That presentation can be made by the way of the administrator, whoever want to make that. If you think it's legal, if you think it's a legal presentation, Mr. Donna, Administrator Donna, you kick it to legal. You know what I'm saying? But we want to get a clear understanding, because we all speculate. We say, go call our zone provider. They're going to provide this service. So let's hear from the state exactly what we should be expecting from them. And then we can talk about potential enhancements of services. Any other questions? Mr. Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don't you think it would be appropriate to have a representative of Gold Cross attend these meetings as well?
No, sir, not at this time. No, sir. I bet you and I both know, if I was Gold Cross, I'd be watching every one of these meetings. I think this is more of an internal document that we're drafting. The state is going to set the criteria. Gold Cross can tell us what they want, and I'm sure they will be honest with us about it. So clearly, we're looking at from the state perspective. We're looking at the state law as what we can expect from them. At some point in time, it's going to be engaged. But to your question, I don't think so. Any other questions about what we just said? Any other
No,
comments? Do anybody agree with Commissioner Clark? I mean, trust me, I am the chair. I can stop the dialogue in my mind. I can stop that certain dialogue, but if the committee wants something to be discussed, then I don't have the authority in my mind to overrule what the committee wants done. So, Commissioner Sayers.
Yeah, I mean, you laid out the criteria from the beginning of your subcommittee, and this was an internal thing for Richmond County to decide what they consider the quality of service. That should not involve any other outside agencies at this time.
Thank you. Let's talk about the GPS. Why is the GPS so important? And why is it so important? Why do you think it's so important, Commissioner Sayers? This is one of your pet peeves here. You want the GPS. No, I'm sorry. Let me follow. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Let me go back to units. I'm sorry. We're on 2 still. But we talked about who should be on the ambulance. We talked about the ambulance arriving on time. And this is not the number that we're going to talk about right now. It's not a hard and fast number. These are just what we assume. We'll come back and do a full closed discussion about these things later. But Chief, from where you sit, what is the minimum amount of an ambulance that Richmond County needs from the provider, as well as give us if there's a difference at peak time versus regular time?
Dedicated ambulances.
Dedicated ambulance, yes, sir.
Normally, peak time is from 7:59 a.m. until 8:59 7:59 p.m. So I would say in those peak times, because of our population and because of our call volume, I would say 10 to 12.
At peak time?
At peak time.
Okay.
10 to 12.
Okay. What about regular time?
Those other times, from what I've seen, and what we were supposed to have was 8 dedicated to Richmond County for emergency transport.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. Any other comments around that? Commissioner Sayers? Mr. Dennis Williams?
No, sir. I agree with what Chief Williams just said. He said 10 to 12, but I thought at one point that was a hard fact case or number of 11. But that's right in the middle of what he said, so I'm comfortable with that. But as the chief said, based on our population now, but I want to remind everybody we have a greater volume during that same peak time of additional people in the city. That can increase by almost 100,000 people coming to Augusta to function, to do things, passing through here, military things coming in, all these kinds of things that adds to that. So we've had a kind of a guess at what that visiting number, but it's well over 100,000 in my opinion, and based on the information I've seen. Thank you.
Okay. Administrator Donald.
Yeah, I just think without having a ton of data, I think that you can maybe start with that as a baseline, but I do think as you look at, what the zone provider agreement says, as well as, some of the data that you may be able to get, that number, I wouldn't determine that number just based off of happenstance. I think you want to look at it. You may start with that number as a baseline of what you've done in the past, but depending on, how you plan or what you plan to supplement, that commitment could go up or down.
Yes,
I think you want to base it on your decision on the level of service you want.
Okay. Anybody else have any other comments they want to make around that? Also, I sent out this, Ms. Bonner sent out to you this morning, from the year, from 2005 up to date, you can kind of look at what was some of the agreements was in terms of ambulances at that particular time. So you can look from a historical perspective. We don't have to discuss it today, but you get a chance just to look at what history has said. And I think up to about what it was, about 16 or something like that. Those years prior to that, those was the years when Gold Cross we were either co-zone owners or either we were the zone owners. So just think about that. So now we're talking about them being a provider. The current agreement that we have is that they are the provider. But you go back to 2005. I thought it was something in 2009 or 10 in between it, but I don't see that. I see it jumps to 14. At that particular time, they were the provider, and they might have been eventually became. But when I say provider, we're talking about from a procurement perspective. They were awarded to be it. They were awarded to be it. And now once where we are now, we're in a place that they own the zone. So just look at that differently, if you will, and looking at the data. But I wholeheartedly agree with you, Mr. Administrator. It's just part of the conversation to make sure we didn't omit that. Commissioner Sias, talk to us about the GPS and why you think those are important.
Thank you, Chairman. GPS is critically important. First off, GPS can tell you whether the ambulance on a call has stopped, hasn't been involved in another accident, is not proceeding on. It can tell you whether that ambulance went to the right location. It also tracks we also track our other vehicles, our other emergency vehicles with GPS and some of our regular work vehicles. So GPS is extremely important. And it also can give you an estimate time of when that ambulance should be there. If you're tracking, even if you don't know, GPS can give you an estimated time of arrival. And it does that with your regular GPS in your vehicle. It'll give you an idea how far you got to go and to where you're going. So GPS, in my view, is extremely critical to all phases of this government as we discuss emergency services for our city and our community. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else want to make a comment on that? Yes, sir, Mr. Dunlap.
In consideration of having the ability to view GPS data for the EMS zone provider and the ability to go back and pull that data is something that needs to, when Commissioner Sias, when you mention us, GPS, if we had that capability now, we would only really have that capability just to view and what's going on in real time right now. And then, like I gave the example earlier of the commissioner from the 7th slipping and falling at the municipal building, I'm just want to speak from a dispatch standpoint. We would not in the 911 center be able to provide ETAs based off of the GPS information. And there's also levels of that GPS that we would have to have the ability to know if that particular ambulance is going to a particular location. So while I agree with you that it's important, and I just want to say from a dispatch perspective, it's more important for us when it's units that we dispatch.
Mr. Sias, thank you.
Yeah, let me give a follow-up to what Mr. Dunlap is saying. Mr. Dunlap, make no mistake, I'm not talking about GPS standing up alone by itself in this issue. Not at all. This is a supplement to everything else we've talked about and we mentioned.
Excellent. And I was just trying to go back to what was mentioned in the first meeting regarding GPS and just wanted to make sure it was clear. So excellent.
Anybody else want to make any comments on that? Okay, I'm going to let this be the last one here for the day because I'm going to be right at an hour 15 minutes. We're ready to hour in just a couple of minutes here. Mr. Dunlap, what is this the emergency management service data? What data, if any, does you currently have? If not, can you give us a rationale why you don't have it, if you don't mind?
Well, let me make the first and it's probably my OCD, but the first thing, and this even goes to the name of the committee, it should be emergency medical service
Okay,
instead of emergency management service.
okay,
Emergency management service is more of the response to disasters and mitigation and preparation. And so we're talking about the medical service, EMS, emergency medical service. So to answer your question, there is not much data that we have access to regarding EMS as it stands now. So if we're talking about response times, we're talking about priority levels for responding to calls. We just don't have access to that data.
okay. Is there any particular reason why?
With the EMS provider being in place,
Mhm.
that's where all the data is housed. With it being a private provider, unless that information is requested specifically, and I know they don't fall under open record. I don't believe they fall under open records being a private company.
Yeah, let me weigh in on that too, Mr. Dunn. I didn't mean to try to push a little bit, but I'm gonna tell you what I also believe
Sure.
for that as well. I think I hope my colleagues, I don't sound redundant in opening up this meeting as well as the previous meeting about our staff and giving them the respect they rightfully deserve and giving an opportunity to freely express themselves. One of the reasons I also believe that 911 has not attempted to do anything that even if they had the capability of doing certain things, even though they couldn't track the whole process, there was some level that they could do just for general knowledge on behalf of the government. Number one, they were never assigned to do that. And probably if they'd have been asked on the fly, like I just asked him, and he came up with it, history says, well, who told you to do that? Because there's been such a contentious among us as the elected body. So I don't blame Mr. Dunlap, so I'm not going to stick my head out there for something I have not been required to do. I can see I can do a little certain things, but I don't want to get in the middle of this no more than I have to. And so I just want to say that that's why I make mention to all of us each time, please allow professionals to express themselves freely, because this government, the system, Augusta Richmond County, is going to be the beneficiaries of their expertise. And that's why I say that. So I understand that, Mr. Dunlap. I think you didn't say that to me, but I understand that. Because history says you'd have been chastised based on who would have asked you and nobody told you to do that.
I don't need it 2 meetings in a row, sir. I'm just kidding.
Okay. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and close this meeting out. And I'm gonna say this here, contract manager, I think after we put this together, then we can decide who can best do the heavy lifting. And so I'm gonna kick that off, take it off right now. But I do want at the very next meeting to talk about whether it's legal, whether it's the administrator, or both of them. We want to discuss in detail the responsibility by the state of Georgia. What is the responsibility of a zone provider? And that's what we want to go there. Any questions or any comments need to be made about that or anything else? Commissioner Sayers.
Did I hear you? I heard what you said about the state, but did you also say you want to look into the duties and responsibilities or what it is to have a contract administrator, or you just want to go with what the state requirements at the next meeting?
Well, when I say contract manager, I was talking about I was thinking that was on our end. Now, if you got another perspective on that, feel free to share it.
That's what I'm saying. Are you talking about a contract administrator?
Those are two different conversations. Are you aware of that?
One is state responsibility. When you say contract management, what is that reference?
I was talking about who was going to, for me, what my comment was. So let me clear that up. Mine is that in-house, whether that's going to be the fire chief to oversee whatever the end product, that agreement that agrees that with Gold Cross. When all said and done, all parties come to agreement. We want somebody to be able to track all this data, and somebody ultimately, when the commission says, give us a quarterly report, there's ultimately a single person, even though that information maybe come from 2 or 3 different places, there's a single person that's responsible to the commission that providing that. So that's the particular contract I'm talking about.
Not to beat that dead horse till you get up, Commissioner, but we can talk offline, but technically that would be the contract administrator.
I have no problem. I just want to make sure that we talk about the same thing. Commissioner Dennis Whedon, you had your hands up.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I did mention I had some items under number 4, though we basically went through the items regarding data that I was concerned with already, so I'm not going to hash over that. But that's something that we need to be sure that we will be able to get from the provider in order to provide historical information for us in making decisions related to that particular service. And another area that we need to make sure or encourage the vendor to have is some type of citizen's complaint process. When a citizen has a complaint or issue, it needs to be documented and put somewhere so it can be used for historical purposes. But basically, the other administrative or things related to data, we've already discussed already. And it makes, the more information you have, the better your task is before you.
Okay, so let me ask you this,
Thank you.
Commissioner Dennis Williams. So what you're saying as of right now, you know, from a 911 perspective, you're saying the information is limited. So you're saying ask the provider to get data from the provider about the number of calls they're responding to, where those calls are, area town they're coming from, things of that nature.
Yeah,
Yes.
we need to have data related to the run reports or whatever the proper name is, whatever their trip ticket is, to keep up with their timeline, where the patient status changes, you know, what patient status changed, any adjustment, what level of care that they were changed to, and the estimated time of arrival, getting to a site. You also want to look at the number of 911 calls and the status and the timeline there. Like I said, most of this we've basically gone through already. But these are some things that, from a data and historical point of view, we need to be aware of. Especially since we're offering a supplement, not a supplement. What's the right term?
Yes, sir. So my question is really, let me try to. So you're asking. I know you gave a laundry list, and I think some of it is futuristic in being able to notate that moving forward. So you're asking. Are you asking now to try to get from the provider how many calls they actually answered to? Are you actually anything from the provider at this moment?
I'm basically from the provider because we got control on our end. Whoever the provider is should be able to provide this information because they are the one providing the service. And it's all negotiable.
Right. And Commissioner
it's all
Hassan,
negotiable.
I'm sorry. You through, Commissioner Williams?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Administrator, go ahead.
Commissioner Hassan, I think with because I think y'all are both saying the same thing. I think Commissioner Williams is saying as we move forward, those are the type of data points that we're going to need. And he's saying that we've gone over most of them, but as we leave that point, we want to make sure that data continues to be a part of the conversation because otherwise we can't evaluate. Did I hit that correct, Commissioner?
That's correct, Mr. Administrator.
Okay.
Thank you for putting it so elegantly.
All right, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go through all of the committee as well as through my colleagues who are not a part of the committee to any closing comments here. Start with you. I'm gonna call you out by name based on how I see you line up on the screen. I'm gonna do it different. Start from top to bottom because we got a lady. We'll do ladies first. Ms. Scott at the bottom. Ms. Scott, any comments? You muted.
I believe we are a good conversation. We're at a starting point, but we need to keep the momentum going and not just have a meeting and a subcommittee meeting, but we also need to have action points on what, after this is over, what did we actually accomplish out of this? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner John Clark.
No, sir, I don't have anything else at this time. I think it was a good, informative meeting. I think we covered a lot of aspects. I think going forward, we're going to cover some more good stuff. So thank you for the meeting.
Well, Mr. Sayers.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it was a pretty good meeting. The only concern I have is at the end, I think we kind of start mulling up data. I was a little concerned as I just sat back and listened. I think we took a request and turned it into something else. So I'm not, I would just, we just need to keep it clear. I don't think, I think what Commissioner Dennis Williams was asking was good, but it seemed like it got turned into something else. So going back to what you said originally, make sure we don't mull up too many things. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hyman?
No, sir, I don't have anything to add, but a good meeting today.
Thank you. Mr. Administrator, make your comment, but also let us know what we can expect from you next time.
Yeah, so I don't have any comments, but based on what was asked for, we want to review what products are available related to EMS software. Also want to look at the last 6 months, the data that the fire department has, and then number 3, look at the services that are required to be delivered by the zone provider that are based on the state mandate.
Thank you, sir. Any comments beyond that?
No, sir.
Thank you, sir. Chief Williams.
No, sir, I don't have anything.
Director Dunlap.
No, sir. Thank you.
Commissioner Dennis Williams. Yes, he's making his on the phone.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Good to go. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Once again, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy schedule, our personnel. Well, I think it was a good meeting. Eventually, we'll begin to nail some of these things down. We're talking. I think we are making some progress. We're just not making no hard and fast rules at this point. We know we have a fire chief potentially coming on as well. We want to hear something from him as well as we put this together. Like I say, this is several months away from finalizing this process and eventually allowing our administrator and our attorney to go sit down with the provider with something that this body, not this subcommittee, because remember, this conversation, whatever we decide on a finality, and let's talk about 3 months out, whatever we decide that looks like, just remember it's going back to the body. And the body's going to vote, and then negotiation starts for us. That's when it starts at that particular point. So once again, thank everybody for the time. Ms. Bonner, Ms. Bonner, are you there? And I hate to ask you this on the fly, but let me try to look at the calendar here. I forgot to do that.
Well, I mean, it appears that Thursdays are good. You could do your regular Thursday meetings at 11.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Bonner, do it third Thursday for me. What would that date be?
On well, why don't we just say the third Thursday in May is what you're looking at?
Yes, ma'am. That's fine. There's nothing
Okay.
scheduled.
And I'll send the notice out. Okay, 11.
The time is fine. Does the time work for everyone? Okay. I know I thought Mr. Johnson, he gone. Everybody have a great day. Appreciate your attendance.